Have you ever wondered if there's kind of this secret layer to the UK's rental market? Well, there is, and it's all about subletting. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on how some renters are basically becoming landlords themselves, and what that actually means for everybody else.
But let's kick things off with a question that gets right to the point. Is it possible that someone, right now, is making a 50% profit on the rent that you pay every single month? We're about to break down exactly how that can happen, and figure out if it's a clever hack or a real problem for the market.
All right, so let's get into it. What exactly is this subletting hustle? Let's take a look at the mechanics of how it all works and why it's become so incredibly tempting for so many people. So to really understand this, let's invent a guy. We'll call him John. Now, John would love to get into property investing, but, like most of us, he doesn't have that giant pile of cash you need for a deposit to actually buy a place.
Just look at the two paths John could take. On one hand, buying a place, it's a mountain of upfront costs, a ton of risk, and it takes years to see a return. But subletting? The barrier to entry is just incredibly low. He can get started with just the first month's rent, and the chance to make a profit is almost immediate.
So what's the secret formula here? Well, it's a surprisingly simple four-step plan. John rents a flat, he lists it online for short stays, and get this, even if it's only booked for 20 nights, just 2/3 of the month, he's already making a pretty decent profit. It really is like finding a cheat code for the property market.
And here it is. This is why it's so alluring. A £400 profit on an £800 investment, that's a 50% return. In 1 month. In the world of investing, those kinds of numbers are, well, they're practically unheard of, especially for something with such low risk to start with.
So on the surface, this looks like the perfect setup, right? I mean, John's making a great profit with hardly any risk, the actual property owner is happy because the rent is guaranteed, no problem, and the people staying there get flexible housing without being locked into a long contract. It really seems like everybody wins.
Okay, so if everyone's a winner, why are we even talking about this? What's the catch? Because there's always a catch, isn't there?
And yep, there is a catch. Because this whole hustle, as perfect as it seems, has some pretty significant hidden costs, and they could be impacting the entire rental market. Now, according to the critics, there are 3 main arguments against this kind of subletting. Number 1, it artificially jacks up demand, with more people fighting over the same limited number of rooms. 2, it kind of hides just how bad the affordability crisis really is. And 3, it literally takes properties off the long-term rental market, making it that much harder for people who are just looking for a regular place to live.
This all boils down to a fascinating idea called the pressure release valve. See, by letting people rent just a room, subletting makes it possible to get a foothold in really expensive cities. But because that workaround exists, those sky-high rents for entire flats are never really challenged. The market can keep those prices high because the real affordability problem is being papered over.
And you can imagine this effect gets put on steroids in big tourist hotspots. In places like London and Edinburgh, every time a flat gets turned into short-term holiday lets, that's one less home available for local residents. And you know what that scarcity does? It drives up prices for everyone else.
So that all sounds pretty bad. But is this a huge nationwide problem we're talking about? Or is it more of a storm in a teacup that's only really affecting a few big cities?
Okay, now this is where the debate gets really, really interesting. What if, and stick with me here, what if subletting, despite all the criticism, is actually helping the market? So you've got these two sides of the argument. On one hand, all the harms we've talked about. More demand, masking the real crisis, and higher local rents. But on the other side, a pretty compelling counter-argument is emerging. Proponents are saying, hang on, the national impact is tiny, and it even has some surprising benefits, like maybe reducing the pressure to build so many new homes. And really, the argument comes down to a matter of scale. When you look at the real heavyweights in the property market, we're talking about owner-occupiers and these massive institutional landlords. The subletters are just a tiny, tiny fraction. The argument is they just don't have the muscle to actually set prices on a national level. They're a drop in the ocean. And here's the part that might sound a little backward at first. Some argue that subletting can actually increase the effective housing stock. By fitting more people into the homes we already have, it eases the immense pressure on developers to be constantly building new properties. And that, in turn, can reduce both the financial and the environmental costs that come with new construction. So we've seen the arguments for, and we've seen the arguments against. It's a complicated picture for sure. But where do we land? What's the final verdict here? Is subletting a good thing or a bad thing for the market? The conclusion. Based on the source material we're looking at, might actually surprise you. Despite all the controversy, subletting is not considered damaging to the UK property market as a whole.
So, why that conclusion? Well, it boils down to a few key reasons. The whole practice is seen as just too small scale to really make a big dent. It's also not as consistently profitable as it might look on TikTok. It totally depends on having super high demand. Plus, it has some of those hidden benefits we talked about that actually help the market adjust. And at the end of the day, individual subletters have almost zero power to negotiate rents with the big landlords.
And the author, Ilyas Mirza, leaves us with this brilliantly cynical take, which is just fantastic. He says, most entrepreneurs who sublet make more profit selling courses about subletting than actually doing it, which kind of suggests the hustle is often more about selling the dream than living it.
And that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. Is subletting a clever, flexible market solution that's actually helping people find housing? Or is it just another symptom of a housing system that's fundamentally broken? Now that is something we're thinking about.